So let's maybe get started here. Looking forward to this panel discussion on engineered materials. Maybe a couple pieces of research here very quickly from our firm before we get started. Obviously, plastics in general have been used quite widely in a wide range of automotive applications. We expect that to continue even in the case of electric vehicles. There's not a huge difference, for example, in the volume of, in this case, engineered polymers, high performance polymers that are used in electric vehicles relative to the internal combustion engines. I talked about this a little bit this morning, but if you a lot of engineered polymers find applications in have a wide range of applications. These if you look at applications by region, it's fairly distributed. Of course, Asia is a little bit higher, and then by end market, there's a lot of penetration in the automotive end market. But what we are seeing is as demand for electric vehicles grows faster, for example, in Asia, we are seeing some of the capacity outside of Asia for engineered polymers getting disadvantaged because you are adding a lot more capacity in Asia, and that's what's serving a lot of that market. So that's leading to challenges. We do a lot of work helping our clients, especially large chemical companies, evaluate substitution trends, intermaterial substitution trends. And as part of that, we have been looking at what happens, what are some switching trends that are occurring, for example, in high performance polymers. This is a busy slide, but the point we're trying to make here is if you take a look at a bunch of high performance polymers, which is in the first column there, and you ask users, right, what have you replaced it with? A lot of them are replacing it with polyamides. That switching that has occurred in the recent past. And then when you ask them, okay, what are you likely to explore going forward? Again, you'll see a wide range of polyamides, slightly different relative to the kind of polyamides they have used in the past, but broadly speaking in that family. And some of that is driven because there's surplus capacity and therefore prices are really low in the polyamide space. And that's the reason for what you see there. When you ask the same customers, like, what's your preference in terms of vendors, right? A lot of them continue to prefer suppliers in Europe and North America. European suppliers being particularly differentiated in terms of quality, but increasingly a lot of you start seeing a lot of names from China in terms of these suppliers, and they are particularly differentiated, of course, on price. So just a couple of things here. Let's get into the discussion today. We have two interesting companies here. One is Teknor Apex that Sachin Sakhalkar is representing here, and the other is Kristian Gubsch from Mars Materials. Very different companies. Teknor Apex has been around for
100 years now.
100 years, yeah. Okay. And Mars Materials has been around for
just over 5 years.
Just over 5 years. Okay, excellent. So maybe let's start there, right? Maybe if you can introduce each of your companies, and then we can go from there.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Sachin, why don't you start? Yeah.
Okay, very good. Yeah. First and foremost, before I introduce Teknor Apex and myself, I just wanted to take this time to thank you, Uday, for inviting me here. This forum that you had, my first time here, and I had a fabulous day yesterday. I mean, the way you've structured this forum to make it more interactive keeps it very engaged, and I have a fabulous time. So I wanted to thank you and the entire ADI team for making it happen.
Thank you.
All right, so Teknor Apex, like I said, it is a 100-year-old company. It is a privately held, family-owned company for the entire duration of that tenure that we've had. We are based in Providence, Rhode Island. It started really back in 1924 as a used tire company. So at the time, we would retread tires with rubber and put it back into the market. So our humble beginnings actually started in the rubber industry. And we climbed the rubber demand through the world wars, World War I and World War II. Incredible growth at the time. But after World War II in the mid 1940s, as the demand for rubber started to decline, we were wondering what we should do next. And it just so happened that our neighbor, a company called American Insulated Wire at the time, was figuring out a way to coat copper wires with PVC. And we looked at them and said, I think we can do that for you. And that's how we actually got into the PVC business in the mid 1940s. And from there on, we've expanded to different kinds of plastics and polymers. We now have 6 different business units, 4 of them into various kinds of material compounds. And I'll explain what compounding is for those who are not familiar with it. But we are in the PVC business, we are in the specialty elastomers business. You showed some slides on specialty nylons. We make color concentrate and additives. So we got 4 of those in the specialty compounding space. But we're also backward integrated. There was a time when we actually made PVC resin ourselves. We no longer do that. But we are backward integrated into making our own plasticizers and lubricants, which are essentially specialty chemicals, esters, if you will. So we have a specialty chemicals business unit. And then we have a very interesting, we have one business to consumer business unit, which is forward integrated into the PVC value chain. We call it the Consumer Products Division, and really all it is a garden hose division. We actually make garden hose, and we are now the country's largest manufacturer of garden hose, believe it or not. And there's a funny story associated with that, and if you can allow me some time, sure. I'll explain that to you, because it goes back to the core of who we are. So this company that I talked about, AIW, back in the day, they were coating copper wire with PVC. It was a new technology at the time. People really didn't know how to do wire coatings with plastic materials, and they would create a lot of waste. And we were in the customer service business, right? We still are. So we, as a service to our customers, offer to buy back that scrap PVC because there was a lot of waste that was being generated. This was in the early 40s and the early 50s. And then we tried to figure out what to do with it. We initially started putting it back into the PVC, and then at some point in the past, somebody came up with the bright idea of putting it into a garden hose. It's just to manage fluid from one place to another, transport water. So we got in the garden hose business accidentally as a service to try to figure out what we do with the scrap PVC. And that business grew like a rocket ship. Everybody wanted our garden hose, and we started buying back a lot of scrap from our customers, and now we buy scrap from the open market, and we make garden hose, millions and millions of feet of garden hose every year. By some estimates, our marketing guys have told me, we make garden hose to go to the moon and back 8 times over every year. Okay. So we've been in the circularity business for over 70 years before it was a thing. But that's the only B2C business unit that we have. Our core competency is still what we call compounding. And for those who are not familiar with that downstream value chain, I often draw the analogy of us being in the restaurant business. We don't make our own meat and potatoes. We'll buy our polymers from upstream suppliers like Braskem or LyondellBasell or the Dows of the world. Our magic is actually putting it together, mixing it, in blending different polymers and additives and fillers, if you will, for bespoke, customized, specialized applications that our customers bring. So it makes it a very, very horizontal business. Our customers span the industry ranging from automotive to medical to building and construction to wire and cable to consumer goods packaging. We've got 20,000 plus different ingredients that we use to blend and compound. We've got 2,500 or more buying customers. So there's a lot of complexity to our business, but that is how we make money. So we really compete on economies of scope, not economies of scale. And that's a very different business model to be in. But that's really sort of a nutshell description of who we are as a company.
Yeah, so Sachin, I don't know if I've told you this, but I need to thank you, because thanks to you, I've won some brownie points with my wife. So I was in Lowe's one day, and I got a text from my wife saying that, hey, we need another garden hose. So I was looking around and then I saw the 0G gravity
There you go.
garden hose. And the only reason it caught my attention was it said Teknor Apex on it, or Teknor Apex product or something.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, this Sachin works here. This must be decent. We'll just get this. And it's incredible. I mean, it's so light and it spools so fast. It's very rare for me to get a product from a store and get compliments. So that's one of the things that I get compliments.
Very happy to hear that.
So if you're looking for a garden hose, 0G gravity, trust me, it's going to do well.
It does, yeah. We have 80% of the market share. We're in the whole, not just the garden hose, but the fittings that go into it, and the product speaks for itself. And there are multiple millions of customers who have the same feedback as you do, and it just feeds itself. And yeah, that's where we are. But yeah, thank you. Anytime anybody needs a garden hose, please look us up.
Kristian, tell us a little bit about Mars Materials.
Yeah, first off, thank you for the invitation. This is also my first forum. Really excited to introduce Mars to you all. We're a venture and breakthrough energy-backed startup based here in Houston, Texas. We were originally based in Oakland, California, but after we completed a bench scale technology transfer at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, where we're licensing the technology, we were looking for sites out there, found it was very expensive. The permitting timelines were 18 months. We had a grant that was about 2 years, and so we kind of did the math and realized this isn't going to work out. So pretty quickly we had to pivot and look at different locations, and Houston was number one on the place to relocate, and that's because that's where the oil and gas and chemicals industry is the big hub here. And we found a nice landlord-tenant partnership relationship with Shell, where we're currently producing our product. We make a compound, or a monomer, I should say, called acrylonitrile. It's the main precursor for plastics, rubbers, wastewater treatment chemicals, ABS plastic, and Legos. The A stands for acrylonitrile. And it's the main precursor, but there's no low carbon alternative available on the market. And so we've conducted discovery with the acrylamide, the entire global acrylamide industry, which is the wastewater polymer treatment application, as well as the majority of the 10 largest carbon fiber manufacturers. And what we hear is that there is a strong shift in demand, especially in Europe, for low carbon alternatives. And so they're really excited about our product with the global acrylamide industry. Initially, we've done product validation with them, so we've actually produced samples for them at the gram scale, so much smaller than what most of you are familiar talking about, but very small quantities, had them tested in their process. They were actually able to produce quantities of their downstream product with this small amount of material, indicating that our material is a drop-in replacement, and they're like, we want more of this material. So we've worked out of our pilot facility, like I mentioned, out of the Shell Technology Center here in Houston, to produce more volumes of this material. In a short 18 months, and with a small but mighty team of only 8 folks, we've been able to design, fabricate, and commission this fully operational pilot plant that has reactor, separation, and analytical capabilities, and are currently working to, on the commercial side, produce those kilogram volumes of material for full product validation, as well as do a 1,000 hours of continuous demonstration to demonstrate that our process is robust and stable, and we'll use that data to build a much larger facility with our commercial demonstration plant, which we anticipate will be based right here somewhere in the Gulf. We're still conducting siting activities. So yeah, that's a little bit about our progress today. I think what I'm really excited about today here at the forum is learning from the larger partners. That's how we've been successful, is we're nimble. In the last panel we talked about moving quick, being nimble, being able to execute fast. I think that's what our team excels at, and we've leveraged partnerships in one of our cases, Shell, to leverage their health and safety infrastructure, procurement capabilities, logistics, waste handling, all of that costs millions of dollars, has taken decades to develop, we've been able to tap into. And I think that's what our team really excels at, is being able to leverage and find those synergies. Where do we do well? Where do our partners do well? And being able to really capitalize on that. So excited for the discussion today.
So Kristian, like when you look at acrylonitrile markets, right? I mean, like 50% of that goes into fibers, right? Acrylic fibers and all of that. And in comparison, some of the other market applications are fragmented. Any particular reason why you looked at, let's say, acrylamide in water treatment or polyacrylonitrile? Like, why those applications?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. What we're hearing from our customers over in Europe is that there's a strong pressure to decarbonize, and particularly caused by some of the more recent regulation over there. There's this big push where their supply chain is moving over to China, becoming actually more carbon intensive, and there's no currently available low carbon alternative on the market. And so they're trying to source from any company that's producing this lower carbon material, and they're willing to pay in the short term a small premium for that. And while our goal is to become cost parity with the fossil process, this provides an excellent opportunity for us to enter a beachhead that can sustain a little bit of a higher price while we work to lower those production costs. And where we really see the large opportunity is in the high growth market of carbon fiber. The energy transition will be, one of the foundational materials of the energy transition is carbon fiber, because one of the biggest opportunities is in conductoring and reconductoring these transmission lines with carbon composites. One conductoring company that I've talked to recently said that by 2040, this could be a $400 billion per year industry. And the reason for that is because we're going to have to bring on a bunch more energy to support the transition as we move forward. So I think that's one application. Hydrogen storage is another application to enable mobility applications in trucking or aviation. You're going to need a lightweight, strong material to hold that hydrogen, and carbon fiber is a good example of that. And right now it lacks a stable supply of feedstock and also a low carbon option as well.
Thank you. That's helpful. So, Sachin, how does the compounding business work? Right. I'm assuming that there is a steady state of volume that you are serving based on applications that you have developed with specific customers.
Yeah.
But then every year you have to, for growth, I'm assuming you have to develop new applications. You have to innovate with new customers. Just give us an overview of how the business model works.
So you're right that we have spec applications, as we would call them. If you're in the automotive industry, you've got specified applications that you can spec into, and then you have that business until the new models come out, and then you have to rebid for those businesses. Or you have applications in the medical field where it is a long process to get approved, but once you're approved, usually you're in it for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have our color concentrates and master batch businesses where you're selling into consumer packaged goods, and the life cycle of those products are maybe months. Right? Imagine you're selling to a Berry Plastics and they have a red colored bottle, and then the next season comes around, they have a blue colored bottle. And so there's a lot of churn in that kind of business. So we have the spectrum from very long-term, steady business opportunities to very short-term opportunities. But in every case, we are always engaged with the customer in the design part of it for new applications. So in our business, I think most of our growth comes from existing customers that we increase share of wallet.
Okay.
Or for new applications. So 70 or 80% of our growth actually comes from existing customers. But then we actively try to go after newer applications and newer markets. And we try to get in on the ground floor and the design phase of it, because when we are in there, we can actually help with material design, and we can actually then enjoy a healthier profit margin on that. So that's where our R&D and innovation is usually focused on. It's almost always driven by customer needs as opposed to a technology push, because we are further downstream and our business is really dependent on our relationship with customers, because we're not inventors of molecules, right? So our innovation is dependent upstream on the innovations of our suppliers. They like to, we like to partner with those that can bring us new polymers or new chemistries. But really, our motivation for innovation comes from unmet customer needs. Mm-hmm. And that's where we are. I'll give you an example to bring it to life, for example, right? Just simple things, because we all use these products every day and we don't really think about them. I'll give you two consumer examples, right? So You might have, at least the ladies in the room here, might have heard of this lip balm called EOS, right? Now, we actually got in with them in the design phase back in the day, because when they were trying to think about how they're going to differentiate themselves from the chapsticks of the world, they designed the module specifically for women in a little egg-shaped thing, because they said, look, women will have a lot in their person, they want to reach in and distinguish their lipstick from a lip balm. So they designed it with that user persona in mind. And so when we were working with them, they said, we want to have something that is nice, silky feel to it. So when they grab it in the purse, they can actually feel it, right? And it's got to have bright colors, and it's going to be able to be over-molded onto polypropylene and things of that nature, right? So we get in with there, and we get in the design phase of it, and we've enjoyed that business for the entire lifetime of that business. Other examples, we sell elastomers, for example.
So if I can stop you there. So can you tell us, like, what does that look like? So you guys sell them the material that they then fabricate onto...
That's right.
Okay.
All we do is sell pellets.
Okay.
Right. So we sell to converters. So EOS will have contracted injection molding houses, and those will be our customers. Our specifiers are.
Do you have a recipe, or they have a recipe that says this is how you blend this in? And...
We have. So our intellectual property are recipes. We in fact call them that, right?
Okay.
Recipes and formulation. So any compound will have 8, 10, 12 different ingredients in it, and our IP is the composition of those ingredients and how you process them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so you have to collaborate also with the processor or the fabricator in terms of making sure that your recipe works with their equipment, the design of the product and everything.
Absolutely. I think we have to actually collaborate across the value chain. So we actually work with our suppliers to sometimes tweak the materials that they give us. We collaborate with the converters. Okay. And sometimes we actually collaborate with the OEMs at the design phase as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So our innovation group has chemists who, let's say they're the chefs, if you will. And then we also have application development service. We have big application development labs where we actually try to replicate what our converters are trying to do at scale. Mm-hmm. And it's a combination of chemistry and processing support that allows us to win business.
That's helpful. Sorry, you were going to talk about the second example.
Oh yeah, so another example I'll give you is back about 10-15 years ago, there was a big surge of applications that caused for soft grip. Okay, so all of us, when we wake up, we brush our teeth, and back in the day we would have a solid sort of plastic toothbrush, and now you see the toothbrushes have these soft handles on them, right? So there's that whole overmolding phenomena. If you look at power tools, you look at brushes, you look at all kinds of things, there'll be soft grips on them. So when we work with some of these big, consumer good companies, they'll come to us and ask us for specific type of gripping materials. But let's take Oral-B as an example. One of the things they'll ask us and say, hey, the grippiness is good, but for kids' toothbrushes, we also wanted to have a lot of bite resistance, because young kids tend to bite into the toothbrushes, and we don't want to make sure that pieces of it don't come off and are swallowed. Or they'll come to us and ask us and say, look, when we are designing women's razors, women tend to shave more in the shower as opposed to men. And so we want to have, in addition to grip, we want to have it as a wet grip material so that the grippiness is maintained even under soapy water conditions. So they'll come to us with things like that. At dinner, I was telling last night somebody a very funny story. Back in the day when you had these pens with a little soft grip on it, one designer came to me and said, and this is quote, okay, this is a quote from him. He said, have you felt the underbelly of a frog before? And I said, what the heck does that got to do with design? He said, no, you go feel an underbelly of a frog. That's the feel I want on my pen grip. So we get requests of this kind, and we have to then translate that request into engineering requirements to figure out what is it that exactly they need. So there are all kinds of these examples. So that's how we actually interact, and really what we've built our insights and data over decades is translating regular requirements that you and I as consumers experience into engineering requirements. So
Thanks.
it's a fascinating business.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sachin. Kristian, can you tell us a little bit about the origins of the technology? You're partnering with a national lab in terms of the IP for this. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So ever since I was in high school, was really passionate about finding ways in which we could take this waste gas of CO2 and convert it into higher value chemicals, particularly ones that lock up CO2 in the long term. I remember looking, back in the day at artificial photosynthesis and really these pie in the sky ideas that didn't seem super realistic to me at the time. But as I dug in deeper, I saw there was a lot of research and even some commercial applications to some of these technologies. And as I went throughout my college career, dabbled in a couple of research areas related to CO2 conversion to formic acid and methanol. And by the time I graduated, I was ready to plunge into the world of CO2 utilization. Unfortunately, it was at the peak of COVID. And so I was doing what a lot of folks probably in the room remember doing, a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of online networking. That was a boon for me as a fresh undergraduate student because folks like yourself had a little more potentially extra time on your hand, willing to spend some time with an undergraduate student who was eager to learn more about your background and what you're working on. And during all of this networking, I found my eventual co-founder through this panel. It was a panel of carbon removal experts, and they had some funding to select a technology to scale up. And at the end of the panel, one of the entrepreneurs was talking about how he was looking for a chemical engineer to help with some technology discovery that he was focused on. He had started a couple of other companies, was a commercialization expert, and so he had the business things down pat, but he wanted to learn more about the chemical engineering side. Could this actually work in practice? And so I reached out to him immediately after the call. A few weeks later, we were working together. I was volunteering my time, and we were developing this rigorous market-focused framework where we looked at 18 different technologies that were up for licensing at the national labs. We conducted discovery with these national labs, really looking at the economic carbon intensity and kind of scalability of these solutions. And really what we fell in love with was nitrylation, the technology that we're commercializing today, because it had the ability to take that CO2 directly, convert it into this compound acrylonitrile. It's a $12 billion market. A kilogram of it is used per person per year on the planet. Really be able to plug into an existing market using technology that is widely available off the shelf. We talked earlier about lowering capex and intensity utilizing existing assets. This is a thermocatalytic technology, so builds upon the foundational knowledge base of the past 200 years that has been around. And we licensed that technology from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And with that partnership, we've been able to raise over $6 million in mostly non-dilutive funding, primarily from the Breakthrough Energy Fellowship, completed technology transfer at the National Lab where we produced those gram samples that I mentioned earlier, and now we're in the midst of this kilogram sample production and 1,000-hour experimentation. So it's really been a whirlwind. They say in startup world, 1 year feels like 7. It's like dog years, and I certainly feel that. Sometimes a week feels like a whole month has passed. But it's a really exhilarating journey where you're challenged from many different sides. It's very resource constrained, but through partnerships with folks like the national labs, like Shell, we're able to ease that a little bit and really see the light at the end of the tunnel. And instead of just being overwhelmed by the constant, opportunities and challenges that come your way when you're in a startup and at the early stages when things are very uncertain.
So for you in the process, where are the key bottlenecks, or I guess your development is focused on what? Is it focused primarily on the CO2 conversion step, or are you also focused upstream on where do you get the CO2 from?
Yeah, great question. So today we have a fully operational plant where we utilize an intermediate. We're using this intermediate that can be derived from captured CO2, so aren't fully back integrated yet, but we have a pathway to do that, again, through partnerships. So we're utilizing this intermediate. It's the same intermediate that we use at the bench scale to produce these kilogram samples of material. And really where our main bottleneck is on the technical side of things is getting to that 1,000 hours of continuous operation. That is is a huge benchmark for any industrial process to demonstrate that your catalyst is stable over time, that you can continuously produce at the yields in which you anticipate your larger plants will be at, and provides the de-risking and validation to feed into an independent engineering report, and eventually that design of the larger scale plant.
And this is a heterogeneous catalyst?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is can you talk a little bit about what are the main challenges? Is it like catalyst deactivation? Is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say when I was doing the technology transfer at the National Lab, I was the one in the lab. I still also work in the lab from time to time. But the main challenge is what we were seeing is the system plugging a little bit more frequently than we would like. So just getting blocked up with gunk, catalyst deactivation, like you mentioned, and then some product recovery. Acrylonitrile has a very high vapor pressure. What that means is it doesn't like to stay in the liquid form, and so you have to get creative with how you handle it when it's post-reaction, as well as when you're separating it. And so those are all of the challenges that we're working to address. I would say the primary one, though, is maintaining that catalyst lifetime. We're fortunate in that we have a catalyst when it's regenerated over time. We haven't seen significant degradation in its activity at the bench scale. And so we're working to, first replicate that at the pilot scale, and then show that we're able to continuously run this process via what I think would most likely be kind of have parallel reactors, where you have some reactors that are on, some reactors that are regenerating, and to hit that output. Our nameplate capacity today at the plant is a little less than 1 kilogram a day of the acrylonitrile.
Okay. So, Sachin, 60 to 70% of growth is coming from existing customers. So, that means you have great relationships with existing customers, and they treat you as trusted partners, and they keep coming back to you. But does that also mean that maybe finding that additional growth is harder because there's a very different business, right? Because you probably have hundreds of potential applications, if not thousands, right, where you can help. So how do you look for growth when you have such a wide canvas?
Yeah, and it's actually a poignant question that we're dealing with now, right? I mean, we do have very long, steady relationships. That's fun. In fact, the longest pole in our tent is our relationship with our customers and suppliers. We've had relationships with our primary largest customers for 40 years. Mm-hmm. They have been buying our products, evolving products as they were, for decades. And that speaks, volumes. And so that trusted partnership, I think, through ups and downs is really how we've built our business. So our business is indeed built on relationships. What that has done in the recent past is because our growth has come from existing customers and we are sort of embedded into those value chains, we have not been able to grow our muscle, the hunting muscle, if you will, to go look for newer applications and the like, right? For the longest time, applications would be inbound and come to us, and we really spend a lot of innovation and R&D effort, but we really not spend a lot on marketing and outreach and outbound. And so that has been a challenge that I think we are trying to cope with. But like I've said, our growth has really come, we've never had a long-term 5, 10, 15-year strategic plan and intentional growth. That growth has always happened to us organically.
Organically, yeah.
like the garden hose business, or the businesses that we've gotten into really have come to us by listening intently to our customers and pivoting along the way. So our business model, like I said, is based on economies of scope. We are not asset heavy, and intentionally we have smaller assets that allow us to remain adaptive and agile and flexible. So the way we go about trying to even secure new opportunities, we are now actually gathering that marketing muscle and the hunting muscle, but really comes from being out there and listening to the voice of the market. And once we have that, we have all of these application repertoire experience that we can apply to it. Right? So translation opportunities, I think, is, when I say translation, you have an application success in one area, can you take that in another area? Is a large part of our growth.
So there are at least some drivers, right? I mean, there's designed for recyclability, right? Conceptually, that's a driver. Sustainability, low greenhouse gas footprint, that's a driver, right?
Yeah.
So there are clearly some drivers, but I'm assuming that all innovation that is because of these drivers is being fed back to you through your existing customer relationships because they are under pressure and all of that.
Yeah, so sustainability and circularity is a big theme, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples. We are big into PVC. So we sell a lot of PVC into medical applications. So think about your IV tubing, your blood bags, a lot of material that goes into hospitals is PVC. Now, as the requirements for sustainability and circularity continue to grow, a lot of hospital they don't really recycle for obvious reasons, right? But there is a lot of industrial waste that can be recycled that has traditionally been burnt, right? In the hospitals, they'll have pyrolysis right there, and they'll basically burn it up. So we've started to, our customers have come to us and say, hey, can you do something with it for us? Can you help us in the circularity? So they'll come to us with that need. And what we have ended up doing is we actually bought a couple of recycling companies which have closed loop recycle. So we'll, the Baxters of the world that are producing IV bags, we'll work with them and we'll take their unused IV bags, or in hospitals that have been out of spec, wasted, not used, but unused products, and we'll take that in and do recycled stuff in there, right? We sell into the decking industry. So a lot of you guys who own homes here, if you have wooden decks, they're composite decks, and you can take those unused or used decks and recycle. And so companies like AZEK and others come to us and say, hey, we need you to help us build a recycling infrastructure. So compounders like us are uniquely positioned in the value chain to help with that recycling. So we found a lot of success in closed loop recycling, not the open loop recycling, because that's got a whole host of other problems. But that's how I think we end up sort of getting opportunities to win new business.
Okay, so, but then if you want to look for that 30-40% growth in other markets, how do you take like an industry filter? Like, do you say that, okay, data centers are growing, should I go talk to suppliers in the data center space? Or what's the framework there? Yeah,
so we have 3 or 4, the essential framework that we use is a build, buy, partner, invest framework, right? So we look at opportunities and say, what are the macro trends of growth out there? Why now? We ask ourselves 3 or 4 questions. We'll ask ourselves, why now? What is the reason to invest in a particular application? Data centers is an obvious one. Then the second question we'll ask ourselves is, why us? Why is Teknor Apex uniquely positioned to win in that market space? And then we'll ask ourselves the question, what needs to be true to succeed in this application space? And the answer to that question uncovers constraints and some key assumptions in there. And then we'll try to sort of experiment. We run agile methodologies to try to experiment with those to either debunk those assumptions or validate those assumptions. So set the essential sort of process framework.
So it's a fairly detailed opportunity qualification process. Why is that? Is that because the investment that you're making in terms of developing the application is a large, it tends to be a long investment?
So now actually, so the thing is, remember again, we are a very horizontal business, so we get a lot of inbound opportunities to develop. And our biggest constraint is resources, right? So we're trying to figure out where do we deploy those resources and how do we improve the probability of success of what we do. Right? For
so your funnel is actually full, and you want to progress the best opportunity. You want to screen the best opportunities through. While I think for a number of the larger companies, the problem is the funnel is sparsely is not full enough, right? The pipeline's not.
Yeah, we have more projects to work on than we can ever really dream of actually supporting. But again, not all of them are real projects. There's a lot of curiosity that happens, right? I mean, And so how do you separate out the real meaty projects from those? And that's where I think we spend a lot of time in the top end of the funnel, or the front end of the funnel, qualifying opportunities before we spend a lot of R&D resources on them.
That's helpful, Sachin. Thank you. Kristian, so I'm assuming, I don't know if this is true, but I'm assuming that you'd be interested in partnering with some larger players, larger chemical companies, right? I mean, who would be ideal partners, or who are you partnering with right now?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have this landlord-tenant relationship with Shell. They're interested in also providing captured carbon dioxide to us at the large scale. I think any, I know I was just talking to someone earlier and they were saying that they have some CO2 that they're looking to get rid of. I think most companies do. So that's something we're looking to plug into. From like my perspective as the chief technology officer, I think I'm really interested in how companies have gone from the larger, small scale, so it could be lab, could be pilot, to the demonstration, to the commercial plant. Each one of those stages requires a specific set of expertise, and I think being able to learn from a company that has navigated, parts of those stages, or even span all four, would be extremely helpful for me. Obviously, I've gone lab to pilot, and now we're working on the next very large step, arguably the biggest step, the demonstration plant scale. And so, learning all of the different ins and outs there. I know you have to generate independent engineering reports, if you offtake agreements, the financing, all of that. I think what we could really benefit from is that operational experience and how you all have navigated that horizon. I think is what's most interesting to me and most helpful.
But what about like existing players in the space, right? I mean, so if you look at, let's say, some of the polyamide producers, maybe they're probably not the right fit, right? Probably, I'm assuming some of the carbon fiber producers like Toray, for example, do you think, I mean, conceptually, because pretty much everybody in the chemical industry has scaled processes through this, right? But I'm assuming if you take like a market lens, would some of those players be better partners, or you don't see it that way?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we've done discovery with all of the, most of the largest carbon fiber manufacturers, the entire global acrylamide industry. What we've heard from them is they, at least the acrylamide industry, they prefer not to back integrate. They want to keep that separate, but they are interested in, supporting our development. And they're doing everything they can to make sure that, they're communicating to investors and to the market in general that low carbon acrylonitrile, specifically what Mars is doing, is of interest and is of demand. And so I think, for the like general partnerships, the customers, yes, are of interest, but I think for building this continuous process, I'm also interested looking upstream and seeing, how can we get a steady supply of our inputs? That's one of the biggest challenges. Feedstock, I think there's a whole panel and, some whole roles just focused on feedstock. It is, the largest challenge, especially when you're an early stage company trying to build out your value chain and supply chain at the beginning. And so I think, partnering with large corporations like Shell on the upstream has been really beneficial. Low carbon ammonia suppliers as well. We've had some conversations with some of those folks and some of the facilities nearby, specifically out in Beaumont, Texas. So that's been, I think, really helpful for us in just getting an understanding of what will this look like, because we have a very narrow and short-term view of like, all right, we need to get this material out the door, we need to run 1,000 hours from continuous operation, but there's an entire project lurking of getting to that next larger stage, and that's where we can really leverage the partnership. And that's why I really emphasize the operational experience and the planning experience that some of these larger EPCs, we've gone through Black & Veatch's Ignite Accelerator program. They've built, large scale plants before, and we've been able to tap into some of their internal tools as part of that program to get some of that, what does planning out this big plant look like? I think those are, at least from my perspective as the technical person on the team, the most interesting partnerships. You'll probably get a very different answer from my commercial counterpart focused on the customers.
Yeah,
that's helpful.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question if I could build on that, because I know we are on the receiving end, and we have a ventures team that is part of my responsibilities as well. And when we interact with companies like yourselves, I find that a lot of early stage startup companies focus on the technology readiness and the operations on the supply side of things, but they seem to push out or delay the demand side of things. And oftentimes, at least we've found that, if you discount that too much and you focus more on the technology side of things, sometimes, what the customers need or the market needs evolves over time, and matching that and aligning that is a problem. Do you see that in your case as well?
That's actually, I'm really happy you brought that up, because I'd say we're actually ahead of the curve on the commercial side of things. So I don't want to, I think coming from my perspective, it might sound like we're very focused on operations, very focused on upstream supply chain, but we have letters of support from the global acrylamide industry. We have quarterly calls with each one of our customers to make sure that we're giving them updates. They're on all of our kind of quarterly update lists as well. So we keep them in the loop on our progress, what we're doing. They've also expressed interest in talking to our investors privately and having those conversations to demonstrate that there is, a market here. This is a real opportunity. So we aren't just kind of heads down. I think my job, I have been very heads down, like focused on the technology, because that's my role. But like I said, my co-founder and commercial counterpart, he's been very active in developing and fostering and maintaining those downstream relationships.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're a little over, but I do want to open it up for maybe a question or two quickly.
So I have a question for Sachin.
Yeah.
How are y'all using AI to help with like R&D in formulating these recipes?
We are. So yes, I'm glad you brought that up. So we didn't have a chance to talk about innovations. We all talked about the hard tech material side of innovation, but there's a very robust and really fast-paced accelerating innovation on the digital side of things. And so AI, as you can imagine, we have a vast data set of formulary that we've developed over decades. And so for us, speed, the need for speed is very high, right? So we actually take, the way we are actually going down this path is we have a voice of the market exercise that we do, and we are using transcription services to take all of the conversational input on the design, converting that into engineering input, and feeding that to a machine learning AI database that we built that then comes up with product recommendations right on the fly. So it really speeds up our product development process, and we found 30 to 40% increase in the speed of our development by using that, which is a big differentiator for us. We are in the process of now even taking it further by looking and seeing, can we actually automate the sampling process? So not only does the AI recommend formulations, can you actually have the AI then feed into a fully digitized sampling structure that also make samples, and those samples are shipped to our customers. And so from the time a customer picks up the phone or sends us an email with a query, can we actually fulfill that with a sample request in 24 hours? And that's not the final aspect, but it gives a great starting point for people, because in our industry, people want to look, feel, touch, try things out. As opposed to have PowerPoint presentations on, comparative properties. And so we are trying to fulfill that need as quickly as we can. So that's where I think we're using AI to speed up the product development process today.
Last call for questions. Otherwise, we'll roll into the next panel. Okay, let's give our speakers a hand.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.